just suggest to you that sometimes you're not quite sure about how what role academics plays in matters these days. Just for example, how many good English skills you might know, but suppose you had you wanted to come up with a name for your nice little musical organization that you have. You've got a real whoopee-doo outfit, and you got to come up with a name. Well, all these rock groups and all the various spin-offs, you could call yourself the Cruds, or the Grumps, or the Unhappy Alive, or the Scott. How about the Door Hinge? That would be good too. But when you get all that taken care of, this old English prof says, well, how about merging the rocks, or the name of your whoopee-doo musical organization, with a little bit of academics? Well, when you were on stage performing, you could bring home a good aspect of the English language. You could do a good job teaching. Oh, is that so, you might say? How could that be? Why would that? Well, how about starting up a group called the Pronouns? Yeah. I mean, after all, you learned back in grade school what pronouns do. And think what could happen there with a great hit tune. You're coming up with that da 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 do 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 da. Yeah. Well, just call it "I'm taking somebody's place." Would that work well for a group called the Pronouns? Well, they'd probably get in all of the stations all over the country with that. Or how about if you call your group of musicians the Participles? And then what would be well, you could have an album, and you could simply, the title of the album would be Dangling. Now that would, see, we're bringing home a good academic point there about language. I think this might work out. Oh, and then it occurred to me, how about a musical group called the Sentence Fragments? And then you could have a brand new song titled "Without You, I Have No Verb at All." That would be good. I think that would work out real well. Of course, if you're looking for people who'd be interested in your group of musicians, people who are not exactly, shall we say, the ordinary campus-related people, well, you could have a group of truckers. Yeah, all those people driving those big semis and so on, you could call your group the Semicolons. How'd that be? And there we've got a little English language tie-in there, but I think the truckers would all like it. Well, in any event, I think that would work out pretty well. There are all sorts of grammar terms, shall we say, and I think they can be used in some way. And of course, I do remember that when teaching here at Mount Union, many times students would come up in my English classes with the wrong word, and then I would always say, no, 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 no. I thought, that could be the name of a rock group too. No, no, the no-nos. Wouldn't that be good? My, that would be terrific. Well, anyway, if you're going to have to write a theme in class, how would that tie in with a name of something musical? Now, that'd be a good one. How could you tie that in with a academic rock group, let's say? Well, I think that the music that you would write would simply, if you have to write a paper for freshman English class too, then the title of your musical composition you'd come up with would simply be your theme song. You've got to turn in a theme at class. Ho, ho, ho. Well, enough of that. Back with you next week. There are sometimes phrases that we use that they're just not exactly the kind that we absolutely need. Authorities will tell us that there's a reason for everything. So, with that statement, I have no intention of quarreling, understand now, at least not for the moment, but just briefly here with you now today, I'd like to just mention the construction of sentences in which many people give reasons for actions. Those sentences, those sentences frequently illustrate a basis for a quarrel. Yes, on a grammatical basis only, please understand that. Now, what I'm referring to is the sentence construction in which somebody says, the reason is because, whatever it is. Now, the sentence in full, let's come up with with a full sentence. The reason our team lost is because we did not have enough players with experience. How's that? Well, I'm sorry that the loss came, that there was a defeat in the game, but I must confess, if somebody if somebody says it that way, I'm even more sorry for the sentence itself. You see, the reason it simply is not because. Don't use the phrase, the reason is because. The reason in the sentence under question here, with the reason our team lost is because we did not have enough players with experience. Well, the reason is the lack of experience. That's the reason, not because of the lack of it. And the sentence would make much better sense if it were phrased, the reason our team lost is that we lack players with experience. Or another way might be, the reason we lost is our lack of experience. Now, to me, to this old English prof, either sentence is much more direct and much more effective, particularly, than what we had with the begin. The reason is because. Or that type of phrasing I just don't go for. It's not needed. It's not helpful either. Now keep in mind, in the sentence that I've shared with you, the reason is the lack of experience. The reason our team lost is that we did not have enough players with experience. It's the lack. It's not because of it. It is the lack of experience. That's the reason. The reason is not because of it. It is it. Now, if the reason we lost is only because of it, well, then it seems to me the reason becomes merely a second-hand effect of the lack. Yet, actually, why did we lose? What reason can we give? Well, the answer, our lack of experience. Not because our lack of experience, but just say the lack of experience. Saying this with a traditional noun clause form, I think, is the most efficient utilization of our language in this instance. Yep, here we go. In spoken English, I do feel the use of the word because, well, in this discussion, it might be acceptable in spoken English, because it places a kind of vocal emphasis on the argument. In other words, you can stress it talking to someone, but it's never really necessary, and its use is definitely, I feel, to be discouraged. And what is reason that we give for discouraging the use of the reason is because? Well, the reason is that more efficient and direct communication is made. See, I didn't say the reason is because more efficient and direct communication is made. No, the reason is that more efficient and direct communication is made. How about that, see? I just took some of my own advice. Well, because I'm finished, that's the reason I'll sign off right now. Not because, but I will. Well, dear friends, you must understand, I'm sure you do, that there are many ways of being thought kind of strange. If you had 5 arms, I suppose that would qualify. If you walk around barefoot in minus 20-degree temperatures, I suppose, or if you don't have a TV set, something like that. But it happens to me quite frequently at breakfast time. Yes, when I'm in a restaurant, a very fine restaurant, and a clean, sleek waitress glides up to the table and smiles, "Good morning," and she hands me a menu and picks up the coffee cup that's been there, all ready to slosh the morning brew into it. And I say, "No coffee, please." Well, that surprises her. "No coffee?" And she recovers briefly and then says, "Well, what will you drink?" I said, "Well, water is fine with my eggs and toast." Well, she takes the order and she mumbles now and stares uncontrollably at me. And then she said, "But no coffee at all?" No thanks. Well, I pick up the local newspaper I bought on the way into the restaurant, and I'm reading the Ohio News and reading the stories about the legislators. Then another waitress comes by, and she sees the empty cup at my table, and she picks it up ready to slosh. And I say, "No coffee, please." Well, that moment, I think, could be captured on film, because she stands there, the coffee pot raised, the cup held firm and mouth open. No coffee?" It's obvious that she's never tried that sequence of words before. I say, no thanks, and I return to the paper and read about state finances and read some other stories. The eggs are brought now, and then the toast, and then the grape jelly. It's always grape jelly that you get. I drink the water. And then the waitress is watching over me, and she's not ready to capitulate. She says, coffee now, sir? She has an expectant air about her because the coffee pot is poised once again. I say, no thanks. Well, back at the cashier's counter, a committee begins holding council. I hear mumbled phrases like, no coffee. What will they drink? What will we do? Turn me down. All those things. I'm reading a story about the state legislature approving a total of millions and millions and millions of dollars to build some kind of a sports thing up in Cleveland. And so, coffee now? No thanks, I'm doing fine. But sir, you've had nothing to drink. Oh yes, the water is fine. But sir, water isn't, it isn't coffee. Well, I appreciate your acute vision, and you will go far. Well, thank you, sir, but what to drink? Well, the water was excellent, that's all. I could tell from her profound intellect that she should be a state legislator. Well, she leaves, defeated, and I congratulate myself. No longer will I be disturbed by a waitress whose satisfaction obviously depends on how many cups of coffee she can serve a customer. But then a final try by another waitress, desperate for a return to normalcy. She says, sir, would you like coffee now? Or something to drink? Something, of course, that word something means only coffee. That's all it means. I smile politely and say no thanks. But I often wonder, what would have happened if I had told the waitress what I really would like to have? For breakfast, even. What if I told her my favorite beverage? What if I had said, yeah, I'd like a glass full of Dr. Pepper, please. Oh, my, but I don't ask for that very often. And the coffee pourers, well, they seldom recover when I do. And I don't really enjoy any of them suffering that much, so I don't say it. Back with you next week. I've been thinking, looking back over the years when I had the great privilege of being the English prof, one of the many English profs at Mount Union College. And in my classes, creative writing, oh my, the students would come up with some wonderful things from time to time. I'm remembering one time when we were meeting in a seminar room up on third or I think it was the fourth floor up in Chapman Hall, but anyway, I didn't really care for some of the poems that had come in this creative writing class. They were writing about very, very big matters, about world wars, and I said, you ought to write about something that's very, very simple. And I said, I don't even want to meet this class anymore until somebody writes a poem about something as simple as and there I was looking at the door, and I said, as simple as a doorknob. And I opened the door and left. I wondered if I'd ever meet the class again, but it did happen. I love to recall the poem that came, well, you see, it was actually at my house that evening. Young man in the class came to the house and rang the doorbell. I went to the door, and he just read one word, here. Gave me this piece of paper. I wanted to share with you a poem that was titled Doorknob, that he had written. Because I had said I didn't want to meet this class again until somebody writes a poem about something as simple as a doorknob. Hey, doorknob, what can you tell me? I can tell you, boy, about flesh and grease and sweat and a woman gently peeking in on her sleeping baby girl. Slams and twists, and the problems we had housebreaking the dog, pulls and kicks, and the oldest son home from the army. Hi, Mom, I love you. It was just a listing of encounters at the door, see? Oh, yes, I met the class, and we went on from there. Then I think of the time that I met one of my former students. She'd graduated and moved to another state, and I just happened to be in the city where she then lived, and I gave her a call on the telephone, and she said, well, can you come here where I'm living now? She was married then and had children, and So I visited with her very briefly. Now, she had changed. One of the ways in which she had changed, same fine personality and so on, but, well, she'd put on some extra weight. Quite a bit of extra weight, but I think I must have said something to her about it. Something to the effect, well, you don't look quite the same, you're much heavier than you used to be, something like that, which, of course, an old prof should never say to a young lady who's been in his class some years before. In any event, I got a letter from her about a week later, and this is all that the letter said. She had gotten an A in creative writing in my class, and I guess I found out why. She said, "My body belongs, kind sir, to the masters of another age, when the full body was in the rage. The woman could bask in blatant praise that her nakedness would raise. My body belongs, kind sir, to the masters of another age, to Botticelli, Giorgione, and Bellini, but not bikini." I'd have to give her an A for that poem, too. Sometimes people think of poetry as being just very, very deeply philosophical and hard to understand. But poetry can also, whether it rhymes or not, but it's just a sense of using intriguing words and saying it, and I think that works up. Now, I want to conclude the program today by indicating something else that a student of mine had written many years ago. See, I retired from out here about 8 years ago, so I'm way out of it now. But the point is that in the diary, they would keep a journal. Students in creative writing had to keep a journal of things. And boy, there's no rhyme, and it wasn't written as a poem, but it kind of has some of the specificity in it that I think helps to make a poem. She had written these words. This was another student, not either of the ones I'd mentioned before to you now, but she said, "I want to be proposed to after I've had the flu for a week, hadn't had a bath, and just threw up in my flannel pajamas. Then I'd know he really loved me." So you see, well, why do I share those now? I remember these things. I love to keep the things, the remembrances that I have of those classes of many years ago, and to share them. Oh, I even share them with myself quite frequently because I appreciated what they were saying and how they were saying it and the creativity that I might find in it. That's it for now. Back with you next week. Hello, and I last week talked a little bit about poetry, if anybody happened to tune in then. Thinking about poetry, I guess, as a result of doing it on this little program last week. And I realized that sometimes that literature stuff, that's what some of my students used to call it, it can be a bit unwieldy, a bit hard to understand perhaps. Like modern art, it can either be seen and acknowledged readily, or poetry can be the object of mystery as to what in the dickens makes it such a good work, huh? Back in 1855, it was Walt Whitman who said of his own writings of poetry, he said, "I sound my barbaric yawp over the roofs of the world." So if it's just yawp, why pay attention to it? And of course, there may be a few places in the world where there are no roofs, so maybe there's no Whitman there either. Well, the noted poet Archibald MacLeish back in 1926 said a poem should be wordless as the flight of birds. No words at all? Then why take the time to learn to read? Huh? Or were these noted writers really referring to motivation, as I think Whitman was, and the message, as MacLeish was? It isn't easy to communicate with words. No, it isn't. Today it seems to be guns and fists that we use rather than meaningful reason, description, and purpose. You know, creative expression looks for effective ways of saying deep meanings. The creative expression does. Archibald MacLeish, for instance, perhaps in just a few well-chosen words, has expressed the sorrow and anguish that all the violence of today can bring. He said, "For all the history of grief, an empty doorway and a maple leaf." Now, is that ridiculous? Just think now. The history of grief, for all of it, an empty doorway. Yeah, a doorway where once a loved one stood. And a leaf expressing beauty. But it must fall. Now, if you were listening to a speech on contemporary challenges, would those lines hit home for you? Or would something more usual, such as, "Oh, it is terrible the way things are with all the violence and the loss of dear ones." Yes, that's a little easier to understand, I suppose. I don't expect everybody to applaud the brief imagery that a poet comes up with. But it does point to an asset of literature. It's the creative dimension that one can use. That imagery business can be expressed in a simile, a like phrase. I appreciate the description of that classic legend of Sleepy Hollow. Yes, old Ichabod Crane was in that one. On horseback, this tall, lanky fellow is a bit awkward, but the author Washington Irving doesn't describe it that way. He gives a comparison of Ichabod Crane. He said, quote, "He rode with short stirrups. His sharp elbows stuck out like grasshoppers. He carried his whip like a scepter, and the motion of his arms was not unlike the flapping of wings." Well, you see, there you've got that to hold on to. And I love that grasshopper reference. His elbows stuck out like grasshoppers. I remembered that for a long time. Well, maybe that's what Walt Whitman had in mind. The residue of a writer's work over time. The barbaric yop that Whitman referred to. He wrote that in one of his long poems that he bequeathed himself to grow from the grass I love. If you want me again, look under your boot soles. Quite something. Is he down there? Is that where he was buried, right in your front lawn? No, but look, be alert. He returns in ideas, in expressions, in images. Even if I'm not lifting my feet and examining, the ideas come. The ideas are there. And it was Archibald MacLeish who said, "A poem should not mean, but be." It's there. It's there. It's the idea is there. It's the uplift of it, the thought of it. And we read it and we become receptive, and then we let the idea be what it is for you without any mechanical analysis. It's just the yop of lasting literature. Think of it that way. Don't deny yourself the reward that can come by reading that way. Back with you next week. Hello, I'm thinking about, how will I say it, one of my children. Well, actually, it's a cat, Bobcat. Yeah, that's his name, Bobcat. His nickname is Robert, of course. And he sleeps a lot. And I asked him about the many hours he puts on his pillow and the carpet and the bed and so on. And even outdoors, he's under the evergreens, of course. He doesn't drive a car. He doesn't have a steady job. So what else is there to do? That's what Bobcat tells me. He said, what else is there? I think he's made his point. But I did say to him, but you do spend a lot of time at one specific activity. And Bobcat grinned. He knew. He said, well, somebody has to try out all the new products. Yeah, see, because Bobcat eats well. Not efficiently, mind you, but he does eat well. And after all, why not? Look at the choices for the cats in all the stores. Fancy Feast, that's a good name, isn't it? It offers tuna and egg, tuna and whitefish, liver and tuna, chicken and, oh well, whatever you can think about, it's in there in different kinds. Take another look at the cat food offerings when you're in the grocery, yes. I was impressed when I did. Well, I might have been depressed also. For instance, we have Tuna Supreme Feast. We have gourmet cat food, put out by a firm in Los Angeles. And then out of St. Louis, we have a firm that offers Purina Premium. They have the liver and bacon entree. And then they also have lean entrees. I didn't check any of those. It must be an appetizer or maybe a salad that comes before the main entree for the cats. Well, there's a company out of Long Beach, California that offers a variety of foods under the label of 9 Lives. Not bad, but I'm interested in some of those other names. Cozy Kitchen, spelled both of them with K's. And the Tender Victuals. And how about a food called Bonkers? There for the cat, but of course you may have gone bonkers by now. In Chicago, a Quaker Oats company offers for cats Pounce. Yes. And it said that the treats are made with real seafood. It doesn't tell us what seafood. It just says it's real. So be it. How about all those new names? I asked Bob, well, could you come up, Bobcat, if you could come up with some new names for the food that you eat? And the cat thought for a while, and he said, how about something called meow meat? Hey, that'd be pretty good. Or veal parmesan. And he suggested mousy meal, but the one I did like also that he came up with was picky licky. Might be a little too picky to suit me, but I think it might do for him very well. Well, in any event, Bobcat has done a lot of fine things with his food. It's gone very well. It's prompted him to write a great deal of poetry, of course. He has a book called Purdy Poems. Many fine little poems in it. And my favorite, I think, that he came up with is the shortest one in the book. It's called To Our Grocery Man. And well, the name here isn't very exciting, like 9 Lives or Tender Victuals or Cozy Kitchen or Fancy Feast or all of those. No, To Our Grocery Man, the whole poem is just 2 words. Well, you'll have to count the words. Are you ready? Deliver, deliver. That's it. He didn't write about gourmet liver, did he? Well, maybe at that time he hadn't seen all the cans in the store when he wrote that particular poem. That's it for now. Back with you next week. I think there's a great deal to be said regarding the language that we have, that English language. There are over 600,000 words that we can use. And I'm just fascinated by a book that came out many years ago by Susan Sperling. It's titled Pop Lollies and Bolibanese. The book is what she calls a celebration of lost words. Words that once were utilized. You know, the English language, well, Old English comes back from around AD 450 up to about 1100 or 1150, and then you have Middle English up to about 1500, and then Modern English after that. But through all of these times, there have been changes. There have been additions and subtractions from our language, and I just think it's rather cute as Susan Sperling points out in her book, and I'm quoting here now from the book. The age of Elizabeth I, the true English Renaissance. It epitomizes an intoxication of the arts. Word fever spread throughout the land as the writers revived old words, they coined new ones, and they created some masterpieces that we recognize as the basis of great English literature. And she adds also that Shakespeare and his contemporaries played with language for the sheer pleasure of it. Now, what happens to all of that, and what I really want to share with you today, is that this gamesmanship that they had with words, there were many, many, many synonyms that developed that we no longer use. They're no longer around, no. And I suppose that the literary device that we most know, that we know best, is the pun, isn't it? The pun. You can have lots of fun with the pun. Like, for example, the person says to the stranger, "Hey, I haven't eaten in 7 days." And the stranger says, "So?" And the other person says, "Well, you know, that makes 1 week." Well, is it W-E-E-K or in this case W-E-A-K? Haven't eaten, of course, for 7 days. That makes 1 week. W-E-A-K, huh? If you haven't eaten. That's a pun, ho, ho, ho. But here are some other words that were words referring to what we today call the pun. How about a leery poop? That was one, a play on words. And both clench and clinch were also words. We're talking now back in about the 1600s. And Susan says that at that time there were 21 words that were really synonyms for what we call a play on words or a pun. And it's interesting. Quarter quibble, that's one of them. A quarter quibble was a pun. We had also a quibble, but we had a quiblin and a quiddity, and a quillet, and a quip, and a quirk. Those were all puns. That is not the words themselves. The word that we now use today is pun for what that word meant back then. Also sham. Of course, sham today is quite different, but they called, that was a pun. And a whim, W-H-I-M, was another term that fit that category. Well, you get in quite a number of them. Paranomasia. A paranomasia. That's not something that's contagious. That's something that is a pun. Well, a play on words would be a paranomasia. And there are many others. I like carry witchet. Carry witchet. Sounds like carry it with you. with you. These go on and on. Quiddity I like very much too as a word, but these were puns. That is, the words were synonyms for what today we refer to as a pun back in the 1600s. And language changes all the time, as we would have this Renaissance time in the 1600s. It was in a way, it was a turning point in the history of Europe. It had a great impact on the English language, and the travel to many new lands, rounding the Cape of Good Hope, and expeditions going to the Far East, and even the settling of America. Of course, this all contributed to the exchange of ideas and the resulting influx of many, many, many words into the English lexicon. And, of course, the spread of English to faraway places. And so we have the pun today. But the flam, the jerk, the leery poop, the quibble, the quibbling, the quiddity, the quillet, the quip, the quirk, the sham, the wimblem, the whim, the quarter quibble, leery, the jerk, the flam, the figar. Oh, this goes on and on and on. All about puns. And if you happen to be around next week and care to tune in again at this time, we'll share some very good puns from these days. And we'll call them puns. Not a quibble, a quibbling, a quip, a quirk, a quack, a shim, a shemble, and a shim, and a carry, widget, a clench, a clinch, a fick. We just call it a while with Lyle next week. Back we did that. Last week on A While with Lyle, I indicated I was going to share some puns with you this week. And if you happened to have tuned in last week, or by chance you're switching dial, well, we did talk about different words that were used back in the 1600s. 21 synonyms used for the word today we call pun. But today the puns continue in many ways, even though it has only just one basic word that refers to that type of humor. So be it. Now, for example, here's a pun. Would you like this one? In the city of Moscow, there lived a communist named Rudolph. One day the weather suddenly turned terrible, and his wife said, "Goodness, it's snow." And Rudolph says, "No, it's rain." And his wife said, "No, I still think it's snow." And then he said, "Look, Rudolph the Red knows rain, dear." Did you get that? The communist, the red, oh, well. Enough of that. I loved a few signs of the times here. This was a sign in a reducing salon. 24 shaping days till Christmas. Ho, ho, ho. Not shopping, but shaping. And also a sign at a beverage store. Stop here for your holiday spirits. Ooh. And at an animal shelter, there was another one of that time. Meowie Christmas and Yappy New Year. Both cats and dogs. Well, you can see what we can do with words here. I'm quoting these from a book by Art Moger titled The Best Book of Puns. Well, that's fine. And you know, the introduction to the book was by Bob Hope, of all places, of all people. And this is not just a very recent publication. No, this was published back in about 10 years ago, I think, about 1988. But I've got some others. For example, a synonym is a word you use in place of one that you can't spell. Guess we all do that, don't you? Oh, I love this one that the music store salesman said. He said, "Come in, pick out a drum, then beat it." Or how about the salesperson at the sleep shop? He said, "We have water mattresses with springs." That's why they're water mattresses, I guess. Well, you know about custom-made things, but I'm told a good pun that came out over the, I think it was the ABC network many years ago. They're not custom made, but as this person said, modern fashions look as if they were costume made. Pretty close. Yeah. And don't forget about crossing an earthquake and a forest fire to get shake and bake. Yeah, an earthquake and a forest fire, you get shake and bake. Oh, now, here's a good pun. If you've got your dreams, we all have them. If to make your dreams come true, stay awake. My. Puns. Wordplay. Knock, knock. Who's there? Domino. Domino who? Domino Cowhand. Knock, knock. Who's there? Butcher. Butcher who? Put your arms around me, honey, and hold me tight. And one more. Knock, knock. Who's there? Frankfurter. Frankfurter who? Frankfurter memories. Oh, my, those are collected. That last one by Alex Langos. But wordplay it's going to be a lot of fun. There's no question about it. There was a church news section in a newspaper that said, yes, the minister was congratulated on being able to get his parish plastered. Oh, my goodness. And finally, for today, just one more pun. I mean, this can go on because this book by Art Moger it has about 175 pages of puns. It's a wonderful one, no question about it. But at the same time, well, so be it. How about this one that isn't exactly an intended pun in a Texas newspaper? Lost, small apricot poodle, reward, neutered like one of the family. And finally, well, as for any broken answering machine, it goes without saying. Yes, of course it does. And I'm going to go without saying any more because that's about all that I can do for you. See, I don't want to be punished by using too many of these terms. Back with you next week.